The fluorescent lights in the bank hummed faintly above us, casting everyone in a cold, sterile glow. I sat at the desk with the forms in front of me, my pen trembling slightly in my hand. "Just sign, Mom," Sarah whispered, her tone soft enough for the manager not to hear, but sharp enough to slice right through me. She pushed the pen toward me with forced casualness, as though we were finalizing a birthday card instead of dismantling my life. Her husband, Derek, loomed behind me. His hand clamped down on my shoulder, squeezing until pain shot up my arm. His fingers weren't affectionate, they were restraints. I felt like a prisoner in my own body. I glanced at the cashier, a young woman, maybe mid-20s, her smile practiced and polite. With shaking fingers, I scribbled on a deposit slip and slid it toward her, folded discreetly beneath the official forms. Help. Not my choice. The moment she read it, something flickered in her eyes, alarm masked by professional calm. I watched her throat tighten as she swallowed hard, then excused herself to fetch the manager. Sarah and Derek didn't notice. They were too busy preparing their happy family expressions for the security camera above. Then the air shifted. The manager, Patricia Chen, returned with a stiff smile, but her eyes were locked on me. Without warning, she reached behind her and twisted the lock on the glass door. The heavy click reverberated through the room. Sarah's grin faltered. Derek's hand tensed on my shoulder. And in that single moment, I knew. Everything was about to change. 3 months earlier. If you'd told me then that I'd be slipping desperate notes to bank tellers, I would have laughed. I was Margaret Sullivan, 67 years old, recently widowed, living quietly in Portland, Oregon. My days were ordinary, peaceful. I had my garden, my book club, my neighbors who checked in. My life was a collection of small joys. The way my roses bloomed, the feel of soil between my fingers, the quiet evenings spent reading. And I had my daughter, Sarah, my only child, the girl I'd carried, raised, cherished. I believed her love was my anchor. How foolishly naive I was. It began with a phone call one Tuesday morning. I was watering my petunias when my phone buzzed. Sarah's voice came through, sweet and urgent. "Mom, we're worried about you living alone. What if something happens?" Behind her words, I could hear Derek's throat clearing, like a stage prompter feeding her lines. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I replied, brushing soil from my hands. "Mrs. Chen checks on me every day, and I have my medical alert bracelet." "That's not enough anymore," she said, her tone lilting with concern but threaded with steel. "You're getting older. We think it's time to make some adjustments." Adjustments. Such a neat, harmless word. Over the next weeks, Sarah and Derek increased their visits. They arrived with takeout dinners and expressions of theatrical worry. Sarah's hands patted mine, her voice dipped into the register she'd once used on her toddlers. "Mom, don't strain yourself with cooking. Let us help." Meanwhile, Derek stalked through my house like an inspector. He tapped notes into his phone, muttering about safety hazards. The rug in my hallway, the step stool in my kitchen, even the way I kept my spices in a high cabinet. "We just want what's best," Sarah said, her eyes shiny, as if maternal devotion explained Derek photographing every corner of my home. The first red flag unfurled when Derek mentioned my bank accounts. "All these different accounts, Margaret," he said, shaking his head like a disappointed teacher. "So confusing. What if you make a mistake?" I bit back a bitter laugh. I'd managed the books for my husband's contracting business for nearly 5 decades. I could balance accounts in my sleep. But in their eyes, turning 65 had turned me incompetent. Then, one Saturday, they brought papers, legal documents, thick with jargon, sticky notes marking where I should sign. Sarah's smile was nervous, rehearsed. "It's just a precaution, Mom, a power of attorney, so we can help if you ever need us." I set the papers aside. I'll have my lawyer review these first. The temperature in the room plummeted. Sarah's smile froze. Derek's jaw tightened. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling with mock hurt, "don't you trust us?" Of course I trusted them, or thought I did. But in that instant, the air felt wrong, like I'd stepped into a trap I couldn't see yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my garden, wrapped in a shawl, listening to the wind through my apple trees. For the first time, a question gnawed at me. Was my family protecting me or preparing me for something else? I didn't know it then, but the campaign had already begun. The next weeks blurred into a steady stream of pressure. Sarah's calls doubled, morning and night, always laced with subtle digs. "Mom, you forgot Tommy's baseball game." I hadn't. They'd never told me about it. "Mrs. Patterson said you seemed confused at the store." I'd never spoken to Mrs. Patterson in my life. Meanwhile, Derek weaponized statistics. He arrived with printouts about elderly fraud, home accidents, dementia risks. "I'm not saying it'll happen to you, Margaret, but the numbers don't lie." The way he said Margaret, like a school principal scolding a student, made my skin crawl. Then came the pills. One morning, I found my weekly organizer scrambled. Tuesday's medication stuffed in Friday's slot. My vitamins swapped with my blood pressure tablets. I stared at the little plastic compartments, my heart hammering. Had I done this? Was my mind slipping? When I called Sarah, her sigh dripped with feigned relief. "Oh, Mom, this is exactly what we've been worried about. What if you'd overdosed?" The certainty in her tone hollowed me out. For the first time, I doubted myself. That night, I wandered my house in a haze, checking locks, rebalancing my checkbook, rereading the same page of my novel 3 times. Everything was normal, orderly, sharp. My mind felt clear. But Sarah's words lingered like poison. What if you'd overdosed? I pressed my palms to the mirror in the hallway and whispered to my reflection, "You're not crazy. You're not losing it." Yet, as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed myself. The next morning, Derek showed up unannounced. He prowled my kitchen, opening cabinets, peering into my refrigerator. "Everything looks good," he said with false cheer. But then I caught him photographing my pill bottles. "What are you doing?" "Just keeping track," he said smoothly. "Sarah worries, you know." I watched his thumb flick across his phone, saving images of every prescription I owned. My skin prickled with unease. It wasn't help, it was evidence. Evidence for the case they were building against me. That was the moment I picked up the phone and called Robert Martinez, my lawyer of 15 years. My voice shook as I told him about the documents, the pressure, the pills. "Margaret," he said gravely, "don't sign anything. Come see me tomorrow morning." When I hung up, I caught my reflection again. The woman staring back at me wasn't frail or confused. She had silver hair, sharp eyes, and a spine stiff with fury. She wasn't in decline. She was waking up. Robert Martinez's office smelled like polished wood and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. He stood when I walked in, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and 3 decades of other people's disasters under his belt. "Margaret," he said, guiding me into a chair, "you did the right thing." He spread the stack of papers Sarah had left like a fan, power of attorney documents thick with clauses and little yellow flags telling me where to surrender my life. He read in silence, jaw tightening. When he finally spoke, his voice was level, but edged. "These aren't safeguards. They're a transfer of power. This would give Sarah and Derek authority to manage and dispose of your assets, override your medical decisions, even place you in a facility without your consent." I felt the floor tilt. They said it was just a precaution. Predatory elder abuse often wears that word, precaution. He slid me a legal pad. We start documenting every call, every comment about your memory, every accident with your pills. I told him about the organizer, the photographs of my prescriptions, the invented baseball game, and the ghost of Mrs. Patterson. He took notes in neat, tight lines. We'll get a comprehensive cognitive evaluation, he said. We'll establish a revocable trust and a real power of attorney. Yours, not theirs. And Margaret, do not alert them. Pressure escalates when abusers smell resistance. I nodded. A small, hard shape formed in my chest. Not grief, not fear. Resolve. 2 to 3 weeks, he said. If they push sooner, call me, day or night. I left his office with a folder of instructions and a mind that felt suddenly exquisitely sharp. On the sidewalk, the October sun was bright and cold, the kind that makes edges look honest. I breathed it in like medicine. That evening, Sarah called on schedule, her voice resting on the line like a hand that wanted to look gentle on camera. Hi, Mom. How are you feeling? Any more confusion with your medications? No, I said, watering the roses I'd planted the year Tom and I bought the house. Everything's fine. Good, she said. We'll come Saturday morning. We can help organize your financial papers. I can manage. A pause. Derek has experience. Through work. Through work. Selling insurance wasn't guardianship, but this wasn't about truth. It was about rhythm. Tap, tap, tap until I danced to their beat. I said, we'll see. Actually, she said brightly, we've already planned it. I'll bring bagels. They weren't asking. They were arriving. After I hung up, I phoned Robert's emergency number. They're coming Saturday. It feels like a move. He said, let them talk. Don't sign. If they insist on action, document the insistence. Margaret, if they push you to the bank, that's an opportunity. For what? For proof. Saturday sharpened itself into a picture frame. The SUV, the bag of bagels, my grandkids' laughter spiraling toward the apple tree. Emma's cheeks were pink with the cold. The twins wore matching hoodies, half-zipped like they were in a club I wasn't invited to. My heart ached in the uncomplicated way only grandchildren can manage. Inside, Derek laid a leather portfolio on my dining table, a man about to host a meeting he intended to win. Sarah said, we brought the papers again. It really would be best to get this done. I'll have my lawyer review them, I said, pouring coffee with hands I kept deliberately steady. Lawyers are expensive. These are standard. I looked at him. Are they? He switched stacks. New plan, banking forms, just backup signatories in case of emergency. I read the header. Joint account holders, not backup signatories. They didn't want a spare key. They wanted their own house. Why would you need access without me? He asked. In case you're hospitalized, he said smoothly. Bills don't wait. My bills are auto-pay. What if you have a stroke and we need to move funds quickly? What if? What if? What if? Fear in a cheap suit. These need notarization, I said. We thought of that, he replied too fast. My friend Mike's a notary. We're meeting him at First National at 11. Sarah squeezed my arm like she was rewarding a toddler for using the potty. You'll see, Mom. This will make things simpler. I walked to the hall mirror. The woman looking back had silver hair and unblinking eyes. I tucked a small square of paper into my cardigan pocket, the kind you get with a bakery cookie. I didn't need the cookie. I needed the paper. All right, I said. Let's go. The drive felt like a slow procession toward an execution I'd faked agreeing to. Sarah chatted about pumpkin patches. Derek hummed with satisfaction. I watched our city pass in segmented frames, the park where Tom proposed, the bakery that always overcooked the crust, a mural of a woman with flowers in her hair. The world still existed, blooming in indifferent color. At the bank, a thin man with an expensive watch was waiting. "Mike," he said, shaking my hand. His palm was cool, dry. His smile had the stretched sheen of plastic wrap. Just a formality. The manager came out, a woman in her 40s with a tidy bob and a gaze like a level. The laminated tag read, Patricia Chen. She led us to a glass-walled office. "Mrs. Sullivan," she said, skimming the forms, "adding 2 joint holders to all accounts. Do you understand that gives them full access to withdraw and transfer funds without your permission?" "She understands," Sarah said quickly. We explained. Patricia didn't look at Sarah. She looked at me. "I need to hear from you." I let my mouth go soft. I loosened my jaw. I shifted the pen in my fingers until they trembled. I suppose it's necessary," I said. Patricia's eyes narrowed by a millimeter. She set the papers down with meticulous care. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," she said, voice pleasant, "would you mind stepping outside for a moment? I need to verify a few things with Mrs. Sullivan privately." Derek's grip tightened on my shoulder, an instinctive possession. Patricia clocked it without moving a muscle. "What kind of verification?" he asked. "Standard when significant changes are made," she said. The word standard fit perfectly in her mouth. Neutral, official, unarguable. "Just a few minutes." They left with a notary, irritation disguised as compliance. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a secret locking into place. Patricia turned to me. "Mrs. Sullivan, is this your choice?" I slid the bakery paper across the desk. "Help, not my choice." She read it once. Her shoulders lowered a fraction, like an archer settling into aim. "Understood," she said. "We'll proceed, exactly as they expect. But I'm placing monitoring flags on your accounts and filing an internal elder abuse report. If there's any unusual activity, I'll be alerted immediately." "You'll be in trouble for helping me," I whispered. "I'll be doing my job," she said. Then after a beat, "and helping you." She angled her phone in her palm, subtle as a breath. "I'm going to record the signing. For our records." "Evidence," I said. She nodded once. "Shall I bring them back in?" I exhaled. "Let's finish the performance." They filled in. Mike uncapped his stamp like a man preparing a benediction. Derek's fan returned to my shoulder, possessive, pressing. I let my face empty into something soft and uncertain. I signed where the yellow tabs told me to. Patricia's phone sat innocently beside her keyboard, its camera a patient eye. "Great," Derek said brightly when the last page was stamped. "All done. We'll take care of everything from here, Margaret." He even patted my shoulder, just shy of a bruise. For the camera, he smiled. Patricia slid me a crisp business card. "Call me with any questions. Any at all." Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves skittered across the concrete like small, determined animals. In the SUV, Sarah was euphoric. "You can relax now, Mom. No more worrying about bills." I wasn't worried, but she was already imagining my relief. When they dropped me at home, Sarah hugged me tight. "This is wisdom," she murmured, "accepting help." I stood in the doorway long after the SUV disappeared. The kitchen clock ticked. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked. I leaned on the counter and let the quiet tell me the truth. They thought it was over. I made tea with careful hands and called Patricia. "Thank you," I said. "Your accounts are flagged," she said. "If they move money, I'll see it. Your lawyer can reverse joint status once the investigation is underway, but be prepared, they may move fast." After we hung up, I called Robert. "It's done," I said. "We have recording and a bank report." "Good," he said. "Now we build the wall. Emergency trust, new banking, fresh POA naming a neutral fiduciary, not family. We'll freeze joint access pending an abuse investigation. And Margaret?" His phone buzzed. Patricia's name lit his screen. He put her on speaker. "Activity overnight," Patricia said.
Additional $15,000 to a facility deposit and $8,000 to care coordination. Robert's pen stopped. Total 23. Correct, Patricia said. I filed the internal report. Margaret, I'm sorry. I closed my eyes for one heartbeat. When I opened them, the room was brighter, or maybe I finally was. File the report, I said. Freeze what you can. I'll be ready, Patricia said. Whatever you need. Robert slid a new stack toward me. We go to court. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't tremble. Let's verify, I said.
The courthouse hallway smelled like floor wax and the inside of an old wallet. Robert moved with clipped purpose, his briefcase swinging like a gavel at his side. I kept pace, my shoes whispering over tile. We'd filed the petition at 9:03 a.m. Emergency protections, pending investigation into elder financial abuse. Words that had felt abstract last week now pressed against my ribs like armor. Judge McAdams will see us in chambers, Robert said. Short hearing, you speak plainly, no speeches, answer only what's asked. I can do plainly, I said. He glanced back and smiled without slowing. I know. Inside, the judge wore reading glasses halfway down his nose and the neutral expression of a man who had seen everything and suspected worse. Robert laid out the sequence: the pressure, the pills, the bank, the transfer alerts. He presented Patricia's internal report, the screenshots of my banking app, the still frame from her recording, Derek's hand clamped on my shoulder, our faces arranged for compliance. The judge watched, expression unchanged. Mrs. Sullivan, he said, removing his glasses, do you consent to your daughter and son-in-law accessing your accounts? No, Your Honor. Do you fear retaliation if their access is revoked? I fear escalation, I said. They're accelerating. A beat, the scratch of a pen against paper. Emergency orders granted. Temporary freeze on joint access pending full hearing. Restraining order. No harassment, no unannounced visits, no changes to residence or medical care. Enforcement by local PD. He looked over the top of his glasses. Mrs. Sullivan, if they attempt removal to a facility, you call 911 and reference this case number. The clerk stamped the pages. The sound was small and absolute, like a key turning. By noon, Patricia had us in a glassed conference room at First National. Sunlight fell in clean rectangles across the table. Outside, rain gathered quietly on the far side of the glass like a patient crowd. She spread the court order and her own stack of internal paperwork with the composure of a surgeon rolling out instruments. I'm sorry, Margaret, she said. Not as a banker, but as a person. I wish the flags had prevented the transfers, but joint status... Don't apologize for doing your job, I said. You saw me. Her gaze softened. We'll get it back. Robert's phone vibrated on the table. Derek. He flipped it face down and set it aside. They'll come. They'll bluster. Let them. We hold ground. As if conjured, the door swung open. Derek first, jaw tight, tie slightly askew like he'd dressed in a hurry. Sarah 2 steps behind, eyes wide and red as if she had practiced crying in the car. The notary, Mike, was absent. In his place stood a uniformed bank security officer, and behind him, a city cop, mid-40s, steady stance, radio quiet at his shoulder. Patricia had called ahead. What is this? Derek demanded, seeing the officer. You can't. Patricia's voice was professional, perfectly modulated. Mr. Johnson, please take a seat. You are already en route when we received a court order. She capped the stamped page with a manicured nail. This meeting is to inform you that joint access is suspended, effective immediately. Sarah's head jerked. Suspended? We're family. We have rights. The police officer stepped forward just enough to be present. You have the right to remain at a respectful distance, ma'am. Robert slid a copy of the order to Derek. Temporary restraining and emergency freeze. A hearing will determine long-term orders. Derek read, neck flushing.
This is ridiculous. She's being manipulated. Look at her. She's confused. She doesn't even understand what she signed on Saturday. Patricia held his gaze, unblinking. We have a recording from Saturday. Mrs. Sullivan expressed reluctance. You applied physical pressure. Her eyes flicked to his hand. That will not happen again in this building. Sarah tried a different key. Softer. Mom, she said, voice shaking, we love you. We're just trying to help. Then stop. Help should feel like help. Derek leaned in, palms braced on the table. The officer's hand rose, palm out. Step back, sir. Derek stepped back a fraction. We already moved the deposit, he said, chin lifting, a gambler showing a card that wasn't as strong as he hoped. Non-refundable. Patricia slid a new document across the glass. The facility accepted funds drawn under disputed authority. They've been notified. If they resist return, the district attorney's office will be looped in under the elder abuse statute. The flesh crept higher on Derek's neck. For a moment, I saw the mask crack, the nice guy smile, the hollow concern. Underneath was a narrow, grasping need I recognized from 1,000 news stories I'd never imagined starring in. Sarah swallowed, voice shaking. We put a deposit down. We toured. It's nice, Mom. You'll have activities. And I have a life. Activities happen in it. Silence pulled between us. Outside the glass, a teller laughed at something a customer said, a bright human sound in a room that had narrowed to 4 people and a stack of paper that meant freedom. Robert closed his file. We're done here. Any attempt to contact Mrs. Sullivan outside counsel will be a violation. Derek's mouth opened, then shut. He looked at the officer, then at Patricia, and finally at me. His voice lost its sheen. You think this is over? No, I said. I think it's recorded. He turned on his heel and left. Sarah lingered, eyes shining with tears she might have meant. Mom, please answer when I call. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had found a new purpose, holding the line. When the door closed, I realized I had been gripping the edge of the table. I released it finger by finger, feeling blood return to my hands. Patricia exhaled, a quiet release. We'll confirm the freeze across all systems. I'll flag your profile for personal handling. No changes without you sitting across from me. Understand? I do, I said. Thank you. She walked me to the elevator. As the doors slid shut, she touched my elbow. Brief, steady. You did the hard part, she said. You said no. The doors closed on her calm face, and for the first time in weeks, the small animal of dread in my chest laid down its head. That night, shadows moved differently in my house. Not menacing, just honest. Corners existed as corners, not as places where fear waited. Still, at 8:17 p.m., my doorbell rang. My porch light washed 3 men into focus. Derek and 2 strangers, one with a clipboard, one with the stance of hired muscle. I didn't open the door. I turned on the hallway camera monitor and watched. Derek called, genial tone restored like a bad actor slipping back into his role. This is just an assessment, standard intake before a move-in. I pressed the intercom. You are violating a restraining order. Clipboard looked at Derek. Hired muscle shifted his weight. Derek's smile thinned. We're concerned about your judgment, Margaret. The court will be too. Leave, I said, or I called the police and mention the case number. Silence. Then footsteps. The porch emptied. On the monitor, the streetlight made a slow, reliable circle on the asphalt. I stood there, listening to my own breath, steady in its lane. I called Robert. They brought people, I said. I sent them away. Good, he said. Pack a bag. Sleep at my guest house tonight. Not because you're running, because they are. The guest house smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Robert's wife had set out a basket with toothpaste, a pair of soft socks, a note in neat, looping script. "We've got you." I cried when I read it. Not a breakdown, just a release. Salt water, proof of life. In the morning, we were back in motion. New accounts at a different bank with a fiduciary trustee who looked like she'd have stared down a hurricane and asked it for ID. We executed the trust. I signed a new, narrow power of attorney, naming Robert as backup only if I were declared incapacitated by 2 independent physicians. At 10:43 a.m., Patricia called. "They're here. Again. Demanding access. I've informed them of the freeze. They're heated." "Do you need me?" I asked. There was a pause, and then, "No, I've got it." I sat in the sun by the guest house window and watched a squirrel scoot along the fence with an acorn the size of his head. He paused, glanced my way with suspicion and bravado, then carried on, ridiculous and determined. I felt a surprising kinship. At 12:16 p.m., the DA's office returned Patricia's escalation. A woman named DeLeon, precise and unsentimental, told Robert there would be a follow-up interview and that the facility had already agreed to refund the deposit under threat of investigation. "Send us the recording and the screenshots," she said. "We'll keep them from playing cute." That evening, I went home. My house welcomed me like a dog finally allowed on the couch, tail wagging invisibly in the way light fell warm across the floorboards. I made soup, I read a chapter, I watered the violets. At 9:02 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered and said nothing. A beat of static, then a woman's voice. "Mrs. Sullivan, this is DeLeon from the DA's office. I wanted to inform you that as of this afternoon, your daughter and son-in-law have been notified they are subjects of a preliminary inquiry. Any further contact beyond their attorney may be considered witness tampering. Do you feel safe tonight?" I looked around my kitchen, at the steam rising from the pot, at Tom's dented ladle hooked by the stove, at my own hands, steady over the sink. I said, "I do. More than I have." "Good," she said. "If that changes, call me. No permission needed." After we hung up, I stood at the window and watched the rain begin, a slow Portland drizzle that stitched the night together. My reflection was faint in the glass, a woman with silver hair, clear eyes, and a spine that had remembered itself. My phone chimed again. A text from Sarah. "Please, can we talk? The kids miss you." I typed and erased 3 answers. In the end, I sent none. Not because forgiveness was impossible, because boundaries weren't lines in sand. They were doors with locks, and I had just changed them. Outside, the rain deepened, a hush over the street. Inside, my house exhaled. The lock on my front door clicked home when I turned it. Not a prison, a choice. The morning after the rain, the sun came out like nothing bad had ever happened. My kitchen smelled of coffee and lemon oil from the rag I ran over the table while I waited for the phone to start. It didn't keep me waiting. 8:02 a.m. Sarah. I let it ring into the silence. 8:19 a.m. Unknown number. Voicemail. A woman's voice. Gentle theater. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm the intake coordinator from Sunset Manor. We'd love to schedule your welcome tour." 8:41 a.m. Sarah again. Then 9:03. Then 9:27.
By 10, there were 3 texts from numbers I didn't recognize, all delivering the same sermon in different fonts. Family is everything, you're being cruel, you need help accepting help. At 10:31, my doorbell chimed. I checked the hallway monitor. Not Derek this time. A woman in a quilted vest stood on my porch holding a casserole like a peace treaty. I opened the door 3 inches, chain on. "Margaret," she chirped, stepping into the hello as if I'd invited her. "Linda, Derek's sister. We've chatted at Christmas, remember?" I remembered lemon bars, a loud laugh, careful questions. I remembered another woman counting my opinions out loud. "I brought chicken to Van," she said, pushing the dish forward so the heat fogged the glass between us. "You can't stay mad forever." "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm busy." "With what?" she asked, tilting her head, ready to declare all my busyness illegitimate. "Protecting myself." "From your own family?" Her smile was shaped like sympathy and smelled like judgment. "Oh, Margaret, sometimes love feels a little, firm." "Love doesn't forge signatures," I said, "or treat a mother like a bank account." Her face blotted with quick annoyance. She recovered. "Sunset Manor is lovely. My friend's mother is there and she's thriving. She doesn't have to worry about anything." "Not worrying is another word for having no control," I said. "Thank you for the casserole. Leave it on the step." She didn't move. "You're being manipulated." "I am," I said, "by you." We stared at each other through the chain. The porch smelled of rain and hot glass. A bee slipped between the geraniums and the door jamb, impatient and single-minded. Linda set the dish down with a clatter. "You'll regret this," she said. It sounded like a hope. "I regret raising a daughter who thinks consent is optional. Goodbye, Linda." I shut the door. The chain clicked home. Not a prison, a choice. By noon, the parade grew. A cousin I hadn't heard from in 5 years just happened to be in the neighborhood. A woman from Sarah's church knocked with a brochure about accepting care with grace and a pamphlet on power of attorney basics like she was handing out lace doilies. "You are very kind," I told her, "but care without consent is custody." She blinked, clutching her brochure shield. "We only want to help you accept reality." "I have," I said, and closed the door softly, the way you put down an object you refuse to own. At 1:18, my phone lit up with a contact I was happy to claim. "Mrs. Sullivan?" Dr. De Leon from the DA's office was unornamented, the kind of voice that didn't waste itself. "We've notified Sunset Manor of the investigation. They'll return the funds." "Thank you," I said. "And one more thing. Expect emotional pressure. Financial abuse rarely stops at money. They'll try to isolate you next." "They've started. Casseroles and scripture." "Document it," she said. "And Margaret, get a competency evaluation. It's a brick in the wall." "My lawyer suggested that. I'll schedule it today." "Good," she said. "Call me if a knock becomes a threat." After we hung up, I dialed my primary care doctor, then a neurologist Robert recommended. The soonest cognitive evaluation was Friday morning. I took the slot, already seeing the clean stamp of it on future paperwork. Cognitively intact, makes own decisions. I set the phone down and caught my reflection in the microwave door. Silver hair tidy, eyes alert. Not a woman in decline, a woman building a fortress from paper. The doorbell chimed again. Mrs. Chen from next door peered through the glass, her perpetual windbreaker zipped to her chin despite the sun. I opened the door wide this time. "Come in," I said. She stepped into my kitchen like a friend who had always belonged there. "They bother you?" she asked in her brisk, clipped way, eyes tracking the casserole on the mat like it might explode. "They're trying emotional artillery now," I said. Emotional artillery leaves shrapnel, she said dryly, setting a brown bag on the counter. I brought dumplings. We do battle better with dumplings. I laughed. The sound surprised me, bright and unharmed. You keep camera on, she asked, already reaching for my tablet. Yes, I said, inside and out. Robert told me to record everything. She swiped through feeds with tiny, efficient fingers. Good. People behave better watched. I make you a neighborhood list, she added, pulling a folded sheet from her jacket. Names and numbers in tight rows. These are people who like you more than they like Derek's jawline. Call any of them. We stand on porches together. I took the paper and felt my eyes sting. You're very good at war, Mrs. Chen. She raised 3 sons and 2 geriatric Pomeranians, she said. Same skills. We ate dumplings standing up at the counter, the way women eat when the day keeps trying to tip. And for a few minutes, the quiet was the old kind, the kind that belongs to routine, not fear. When she left, she hugged me hard with short arms that meant it. You call me if pastor or pasta shows up, she said. I handle both. Friday's evaluation was all clocks and shapes and words, and the faint, juvenile satisfaction of acing a test you didn't ask to take. The neurologist was a woman my age, with steel hair and steelier eyes. Any concerns from you? She asked after an hour of questions and puzzles. Yes, I said. People mistaking my wrinkles for a signature. She smiled. You're sharp, Mrs. Sullivan, sharper than some of my residents with medical degrees. I'll write it plainly. Plainly, I said. That's all I want. I left with a letter on letterhead, dense with Latin comfort. I sent scans to Robert and DeLeon. Each replied within minutes. Received. Good. At home, I slid the original into my safe, the same metal box where Tom's discharge papers and our marriage certificate lived. I had never loved paper as much as I did that week. At 4:07 p.m., Sarah called again. I answered. She exhaled like surf. Mom? Yes? I'm trying. Therapy, Pastor Mark, friends. Everyone says I need to respect your autonomy, and I am trying, but... I'm scared, she blurted. When Dad died, it felt like watching someone I loved disappear inch by inch. I can't do that again. I sat down slowly. The chair creaked. For a second, she sounded like my little girl who scraped her knees on the cul-de-sac and wailed that the world was unfair. Fear isn't a permission slip, I said. You don't get to fix your fear by breaking my life. I know. Her voice thinned. The kids miss you. I miss them, I said, the words catching on a splinter of grief I hadn't sanded smooth. A pause. Can we meet, just to talk? You and Derek, I asked. The kids, she said quickly, tripping. With us, maybe we can all... No, I said. Terms and conditions. Mom. Terms, I repeated. Fine, she said, and hung up like she was slamming a car door. I set my phone down and stared at my hands, at the faint ridges of flour under my nails from the pie I hadn't finished making. Somewhere in my backyard, a crow announced himself, to no one in particular. I realized I was trembling, not with fear, with relief. The surprise wasn't that I'd agreed to see them. It was that I'd chosen the field. Saturday came dressed in October's best clothes, striped light through maple leaves, air crisp enough to make breath look like thought. I arrived 20 minutes early with a thermos, a bag of Honeycrisp slices, a bright blanket, and a small black recorder clipped beneath my collar like a stubborn brooch. Robert had wanted to come. DeLeon had offered a patrol car to cruise by. I told them no, and yes. No to Robert at my shoulder, yes to a patrol car at the end of the loop trail. I wasn't trying to start a war. I was ending one. At 1:58, Sarah's SUV eased into the lot. The kids spilled out first, a flurry of elbows and backpacks and excitement. Emma's hair was longer, the twins were taller.
The sight of them punched a soft place under my ribs. "Grandma!" Emma ran and flung her arms around my waist and held on like she could anchor us both. "I missed you," I whispered into her hair. "We brought our sketchbooks," Jake announced, "and Josh says he can beat you at tic-tac-toe now, but he's lying." "I'm not lying," Josh said, already grinning. Over their heads, Sarah hovered by the car. Derek stayed behind the hood, sunglasses on, calculating angles. I raised a hand to Sarah, she raised one back. She pointed at her watch and mouthed, 2 hours. I nodded. She got back in the SUV. It didn't move. It just idled, big and animal. I spread the blanket. We drew trees with improbable crowns. We made tic-tac-toe boards until the paper looked like blue fences. Emma leaned into me the way she used to when she was small, and we watched baking shows as if they were theater. "She said you were sick," she said, finally, tentative and brave. "Your mom was scared," I said. "Sometimes fear sounds like a story. I'm not sick." "Good," she said fiercely, like she was making a pact with the air. "Can we have the apple slices now?" We ate. We laughed. We built a little world on a bright blanket between respectable trees and an SUV humming its disapproval 30 yards away. At 3:12, the twins ran to the swings. Emma stayed beside me, drawing careful lines with her pencil. "Are you mad at Mom?" she asked. "I'm mad at what she did. I love her. Both can be true." She considered that like a judge. "She cries," she said, "at night. She thinks we can't hear." "I know," I said, my throat tightening. "I hope she learns something from the crying." "What?" "That love isn't control." She nodded and didn't pretend to understand. She's 12. She's allowed. At 3:49, the SUV door opened. Sarah stepped out alone. She lifted her palms in a gesture that meant, "I'm staying here." Across the lot, a patrol car rolled by slow, as a thought, and kept going. "It's time," I told the kids. There were protests, bargains, one attempt at hiding under the blanket that would have worked better when they were 6. At the curb, Sarah kept the car between us, as if she finally comprehended the meaning of a boundary. Her eyes were swollen but level. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you," I said back and meant it. The twins tumbled into the back seat. Emma climbed in, then turned back and walked to me with a sudden private urgency. She pressed something small and folded in my hand. "What's this?" I asked. "Dad said we shouldn't give you our numbers," she whispered. "So I wrote mine and the boys, in case." For a second, the world wavered. I knelt so our eyes were level. "I will never ask you to lie, but I will always answer when you call." She nodded like a warrior then and ran back to the SUV. The door closed, the engine shifted from idle to going. The car pulled away. I sat back down on the blanket alone and unfolded the paper. 3 phone numbers, written in a 12-year-old's looping certainty, smudged where she'd pressed too hard. Beneath them, a 4th line, Sarah's handwriting. "If you're willing, Mom." I stared at the curve of the M as if it were a foreign language I might learn to read again. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for the terms. I understand better than I did. S." I looked at the recorder's tiny red light, steady and indisputable. I looked at the dotted shade on the grass. I looked at the paper in my hand and the bench across from me and the life I had insisted on, square by square. The surprise wasn't the meeting. It was this. For the first time since the pen at the bank, I felt hope that didn't scare me.
2 days after the park, I woke to the sound of voices on my porch. Firm, professional, the kind of tone people wear when they bring rules with them. I checked the hallway monitor and saw 2 uniformed officers and a third person in a blazer with a clipboard and a smile designed for pamphlets. I opened the door enough to see their badges. "Mrs. Sullivan?" the woman asked, smiling like a stewardess about to point out a flotation device. "I'm Denise with Adult Protective Services. We received a call expressing concern for your welfare." Of course you did, I thought. The last tactic. If you can't own someone's life, report it as a hazard. I'm fine, I said. Do you have a case number? She blinked, then produced it. I wrote it down on the steno pad I'd started keeping by the door and felt a sharp, petty satisfaction at her surprise. People expected frail or furious. They rarely planned for organized. We'd like to come in and make sure you're safe, Denise continued. Do you have a warrant? I asked. No, ma'am, this is voluntary. Then we can talk here, on camera. I tapped the corner above the door where the lens watched quietly. That smile adjusted a notch. The officers shifted behind her, hands relaxed at their belts. No one was reaching for anything. Good. Mrs. Sullivan, Denise said, the report suggested confusion, perhaps medication mismanagement, maybe some financial exploitation. I let the silence sit a moment longer than polite. Would you like to see my medication log? I asked. It's color-coded. Stephanie at Cascade Pharmacy co-signed it yesterday when she refilled my prescription. I also have a cognitive evaluation from Friday. I held up a sealed envelope from the neurologist, the one I'd printed 3 copies of, and a restraining order you should note. Denise's smile faltered into a human expression. That would be helpful. I handed her a copy of the evaluation and the restraining order through the gap, my fingers steady. You can also contact Patricia Chen at First National and ADA De Leon at the DA's office. Case numbers are on the back. I had written them there last night in my neatest script. The officer on the left, Hernandez, his tag said, looked at the paper and then at me with something like respect. Ma'am, do you feel threatened by anyone? I feel watched, and I feel prepared. Denise skimmed the evaluation, her eyes snagging on, cognitively intact, the way a nail snags on wool. Mrs. Sullivan, she said softly, is someone trying to convince you you're not okay? People are trying to make their fear my reality. That's not the same thing. She glanced at the restraining order, then back at her clipboard, where I imagined pre-printed phrases waiting for a box to be checked. I'm going to close this as unfounded, she said. If someone calls again, we'll reference today's visit. Thank you, I said. Would you like a copy of my camera footage from the last week? It shows 3 unannounced visits from relatives and 1 attempted assessment. Hernandez looked to Denise, who nodded. If you're willing. I'm willing, I said. Give me your email. They left with the evaluation copy and a polite apology for the intrusion. After the door closed and the chain slid home with that gentle, familiar click, I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. Relief moved through me like warm water. This was their last tool. Make me a problem the state needed to fix. It had failed. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. APS came by? Standard when there are concerns. We just want to be sure you're safe. -S. I stared at the little -S as if it could be any other S on earth. I typed and erased 3 replies. I sent none. Instead, I forwarded the case number to Robert and De Leon with 1 line. They tried APS, closed as unfounded. Robert responded, Good, we anticipated it. De Leon, document everything. They're rattled. That's when people do stupid things. I set my phone down and looked out at the garden. The October light had shifted into a low gold that made even weeds look curated. I went outside with my pruning shears and pruned back the old rose canes, thorn by thorn. It felt appropriate. By afternoon, the pressure changed temperature. No more knocks, no more casseroles. Instead, silence. A coiled variety. I could feel it the way you feel a dropped glass just before it shatters. The held breath, the math of trajectories. At 4:22 p.m., my doorbell chimed once and then again, rapid, impatient. I checked the monitor, expecting another round of officials. Instead, I saw Emma, alone. No SUV, no twins, no Sarah. Just a 12-year-old girl with a backpack and bare knees despite the cold. I opened the door fast, undoing the chain with fingers that forgot their own instructions. Emma? I took the bus. she said breathlessly. Don't be mad. I pulled her in and shut the door, locking each lock like a ritual. I'm not mad, I said. What happened? She looked up at me, eyes glossy. Mom and Dad were fighting. About you. Dad said you were dangerous now. He said grown-ups are talking to grown-ups and we should stay out of it. She swallowed. I want to be in it. Something broke and reformed in my chest. You're in it, I said. You always were. She pulled a folded paper from her backpack. Dad wrote this. He left it on the kitchen table. It says, Petition for Temporary Guardianship. She said the words like a spell she knew might bite. He was on the phone with a man named Mike, the one from the bank, and he said something about affidavits. I took a picture of the papers, too. She showed me her phone, hands shaking. Blurry, but legible. The words incompetent and immediate relief and in the best interests. I breathed once, carefully. Does your mom know you're here? Emma shook her head. She was crying. I couldn't. She stopped, embarrassed by the unfinishable sentence. Okay, I said. Okay. I called Robert. He answered on the first ring. I told him about the petition. He didn't curse. Robert didn't waste oxygen on ritual, but his breath shortened. They'll try an ex parte order, emergency. It won't hold against your evaluation, but they can cause damage before we unwind it. Where is Emma? With me, I said. Keep her there, he said. I'll call DeLeon and file a notice. If Derek tries to file today, we'll be waiting. I hung up and turned back to Emma, who was watching me the way children watch the sky, hopeful, wary, certain it can change. You're safe, I said. We're going to let the adults do the boring adult parts. In the meantime, call your mom from my phone. Put it on speaker. She dialed. Sarah answered on the second ring, breathless. Emma, where are you? I'm at Grandma's. I took the bus. I'm safe. Emma? Sarah's voice shivered, half relief, half panic. Put Grandma on. I took the phone. She's here, I said. She came on her own. She's fine. Sarah didn't speak for 3 beats. When she did, her voice was hoarse. Derek left. He took the twins to his sister's. He said some things I don't agree with. Sarah, are you part of the petition? I signed something. He told me it was to make sure you were safe if you did something impulsive. Like breathe without permission? She exhaled a laugh that wasn't a laugh. I know. I'm sorry. I don't. She stopped again, the words snagging on invisible barbs. Is Emma okay to stay for dinner? I can pick her up at 7. She can stay. And Sarah, Robert and the DA are aware of the petition. This will not go how Derek thinks. Silence. Then, very quietly, the Sarah I recognized threaded through. Good, she said. I think I need it not to. We hung up. I locked the phone and set it down like an egg I refused to drop. Do I have to go home? Emma asked. Not a test, a plea. You will, I said. But later. With me. And with a police officer if we need one. Her shoulders lowered half an inch, the kind of release you only notice when you're counting breaths. We made spaghetti. Emma chopped garlic like a scientist and told me about a girl at school who wore black lipstick and wrote poems on her hands. The mundane detail steadied me the way the spine steadies the body. We ate at the table where Derek had laid his portfolio weeks ago, as if the room needed a new memory to overwrite the old one. At 6:08 p.m., my phone lit with a message from DeLeon. Filed counter, court notified of existing eval and restraining order. If he tries to move ex parte tonight, judge on call will see our packet first. Keep your door locked. At 6:24, Patricia texted. Patricia, who apparently didn't leave the battle at the bank. FYI, Mike the notary filed 2 affidavits today in guardianship court. Attached. He claims you seemed confused and compliant. I've added our recording to the DA's file. It shows the opposite. I forwarded both messages to Robert. He replied with a single word. Excellent. Emma and I washed dishes. She dried and stacked them in a neat, 9-year-old way, except she was 12 and I kept having to adjust to the width of her shoulders. She wandered into the living room while I finished, picked up Tom's old chess set, and began laying out the board. Teach me? She asked. I sat. I showed her knights and bishops and the small, stubborn power of a pawn that keeps going until it becomes something else entirely. We were in the middle of a fork she didn't see coming when the motion light flooded the yard. I glanced at the monitor. Derek, standing at the edge of the porch, hands up as if he were approaching a wild animal. His sunglasses were gone. His eyes looked like someone had rubbed them with salt. I hit record. Stay here, I told her, and walked to the door. I didn't open it. I spoke through the wood. You are violating a restraining order. I'm on the sidewalk. Public property. His voice was ragged, with something that could pass for sincerity if you didn't know where sincerity came from. I'm here for Emma. Emma has permission from her mother to be here. She will be home at 7. You can't keep my children from me, he said louder. I'm not. I'm keeping them from your tactics. He stepped closer, into the cone of light, where the camera's resolution sharpened his face. You're destroying this family. You started without me, the minute you turned concern into control. Open the door, Margaret, he said, reasonable again the way a snake is smooth. Let's talk like adults. We are. An adult is someone who respects boundaries written in ink. He looked at the door as if he could see through it. Then he leaned forward and stuck into the seam, quiet enough that he might have hoped the camera wouldn't catch it. You think you've won because you have paper. Paper burns. My breath went still, and then I felt something like a smile that wasn't about joy. It was about accuracy. I spoke very clearly, enunciating each word like a witness. The DA has your threats now, Derek. Step away from my property. He jerked his head up, finally noticing the small red dot above the door, the one that never blinked. For a heartbeat, his expression was naked. Not anger, fear. He stepped back. 2 steps. 3. He disappeared into the dark. I returned to the table. Emma watched me like she was my favorite movie that could still surprise her. Are we okay? She asked. We are, I said. Check.
She gasped, delighted and offended, and looked for a way out. She found one I hadn't noticed, tucked her knight between my queen and rook with small, elegant violence. Check, she said back, eyes bright. At 6:58, Sarah texted, I'm outside. Alone. I walked Emma to the porch. Sarah stood by a different car, the old Subaru, not the SUV, hands jammed into her coat pockets, face blotchy but set. She looked at me, not through me. Thank you, she said, for not making me the enemy in front of her. I'll decide what you are later, I said. Tonight, you're Emma's ride. Emma hugged me hard. Grandma, she whispered, and I slid a folded card into her backpack. My number, Patricia's, De Leon's, Mrs. Chen's. A different kind of emergency kit. Call me, whenever, for anything. She nodded and ran to the Subaru. Sarah hesitated. He's filing anyway, she said. I can't stop him. You can testify, I said. Truthfully. She swallowed. I know, she said, and left. After the taillights disappeared, I sat at the table and opened my laptop. I compiled the clips. APS at the door. The call with Sarah. The porch confrontation. The chessboard.
Emma's laugh, no, not that. Private joys weren't evidence. I attached the rest. I wrote a short, neat email to De Leon and Robert. Welfare check closed. Guardianship petition probable. Recording attached. Derek at door, 6:42 p.m. Threat, paper burns. I hit send. The house settled the way houses do when you remind them they are yours. In the window, my reflection was a woman I recognized again. Not invincible, not unbreakable, but in sequence with herself. The locks were set, the paper filed, the camera's red dot a tiny, stubborn star. Somewhere out there, a petition waited with my name in the wrong mouth. I got up, turned out the kitchen light, and said into the quiet, "We'll see." The guardianship courtroom was small and overwarm, the kind of room where truths and lies both come out sweating. Fluorescent lights hummed like insects. A seal of the state hung above the judge's bench, an emblem, a promise, a dare. Robert arranged his files in geometric stacks. Across the aisle, Derek and Mike the notary sat shoulder to shoulder, their suits the exact color of apology. Sarah occupied the seat behind them, hands clenched around a tissue she never used. When I walked in, she looked up. Her face flickered with something I refused to translate yet. "Be yourself," Robert murmured, plainly, like we practiced. Judge Halverson entered with a rustle of black fabric and the timeless boredom of a person who has already seen the worst twice. He glanced at the docket. Johnson versus Sullivan. Petition for temporary guardianship. He peered over his glasses. Counsel. Derek's attorney stood, an angular man with perfect hair and a tone that assumed the world would agree. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter. Mrs. Sullivan is a vulnerable senior exhibiting confusion and poor judgment. My clients seek only to ensure her safety. He said vulnerable like it was a diagnosis, and safety like a room with no doors. Robert rose. Your Honor, we'll show the opposite. Mrs. Sullivan is competent, independent, and the target of a coordinated attempt to seize control of her finances under the guise of care. The judge gestured. Proceed. Derek's attorney called Mike first. The notary smoothed his tie and swore in with an air of civic virtue. I witnessed the bank signing. Mrs. Sullivan appeared hesitant, confused. She deferred to her daughter and son-in-law. Did she object? The attorney asked. Not audibly, but she seemed compliant. Thank you. The attorney said like he'd just set a rook in the center of the board. Robert didn't stand yet. ADA De Leon did. She wasn't counsel of record here, but the judge had granted her leave to speak. She approached the witness with a slim folder and a blade for a voice. Mr. Whitaker, are you familiar with Oregon's statute on elder financial abuse? He shifted. In broad terms. In those broad terms, is it best practice to notarize documents for parties with whom you have a personal friendship? She held up a screenshot of Mike and Derek, tagged together at a Blazers game. He reddened. I can be impartial despite friendship. Like you were impartial when you characterized Mrs. Sullivan as confused despite not interviewing her privately. She placed Patricia's recorded transcript on the rail. Mike looked toward Derek's attorney, then away. De Leon didn't wait for permission. She pressed a play icon. The courtroom filled with my small, steady voice. Help. Not my choice. Then Patricia's. We'll proceed exactly as they expect. Then Derek's, hand on my shoulder, his "will handle everything" oozing through the speaker. The sound of his laugh was the worst. Tidy and pleased. When the clip ended, the room stayed quiet, like it needed to catch up to itself. No further questions, De Leon said, and returned to her seat as if the floor should thank her. Derek's attorney salvaged what he could. He called Derek. On the stand, my son-in-law tried to remember his good face. He spoke about statistics, about risk, about my pill organizer as if it were Excalibur. He said concern 11 times in 5 minutes. Did you transfer funds from Mrs. Sullivan's account? Robert asked on cross. Yes, he said, for a deposit to ensure her place at Sunset Manor. Without her consent? He hesitated.
implicitly with her consent to joint accounts. Consent you acquired after she wrote help, not my choice, to the banker. Derek's jaw worked. She doesn't remember things clearly. Robert held up the neurologist's letter like a mirror. She remembers quite well. Derek stared at the paper as if it contained a trap door. We acted in her best interests, he said softly. Best interests, Robert repeated. Yours or hers? Derek's eyes slid to Sarah. She looked away. Sarah was called next by Derek's attorney, a move I suspected was meant to humanize their petition. She took the oath with shaking hands. Up close, I could see the tiny fissures around her mouth, a topography of bad nights. Mrs. Johnson, the attorney said. Do you love your mother? Yes. The word arrived raw. Have you observed her confusion? I've observed her fear, she said. The attorney blinked, thrown. Some of it caused by us. Are you saying you fabricated concerns? I'm saying, she said slowly, that grief can dress like control if you let it borrow your coat. She looked at me then, not at the judge. We were wrong. Mrs. Johnson, the attorney said, recovering, did your mother ever agree to assisted living? No. Did she ever say she wanted you to manage her finances? No. Then why did you sign the petition? Because I was afraid, she whispered, and I let someone else decide what fear should look like. The attorney sat down. Robert stood only to ask gently, Mrs. Johnson, do you believe your mother is competent to make her own decisions? Yes, Sarah said, tears finally sliding into the role they'd been rehearsing for days. She always has been. When it was my turn, the oath felt like stating who I'd always been out loud. I sat straight, feet flat, the way Tom had teased me for during concerts. Mrs. Sullivan, the judge said, do you understand the nature of this proceeding? Yes, Your Honor, my son-in-law seeks legal authority over my life. The words didn't tremble, they existed. So did I. Tell me briefly about your current living situation. I live alone. I cook, garden, pay my bills, and keep appointments. I have a medical alert bracelet and neighbors who would stage a coup on my porch if necessary. A polite half-smile tugged at the judge's mouth. Robert guided me through the timeline, the pills, the pressure, the bank. I answered plainly. Then De Leon asked to approach with one additional piece of evidence. The judge allowed it. Mrs. Sullivan, she said, did your son-in-law come to your door 2 nights ago? Yes. Did he make a statement about paper? Yes, I kept my voice level. He said, you think you've won because you have paper. Paper burns. Is this your recording of that moment? She held up a printed still of Derek's face framed in my porch light, the red camera dot just visible above him like a witness refusing to blink. Yes. De Leon turned to the judge. We submit that guardianship sought under threats cannot be in anyone's best interests. Derek's attorney objected in a voice that had lost some starch. Overruled. When the lawyer sat, the room seemed to lean toward the bench, waiting for the state to decide which story it would tell about me. Judge Halvarson took off his glasses and cleaned them, buying time the way judges do when they want their words to land where they aim. I have read the filings and heard the witness testimony, he said. I find Mrs. Sullivan to be competent and credible. I find the petitioner's actions, particularly the unauthorized transfers and the pressure to sign sweeping documents, deeply concerning. He paused. Petition denied. Furthermore, I am issuing a protective order barring the petitioners from seeking guardianship for 12 months, absent a material change in circumstance. All financial authority shall remain with Mrs. Sullivan and her appointed fiduciaries. Any facility deposits shall be returned. He looked directly at Derek. And, Mr. Johnson, if I see you in this courtroom again on this matter, come prepared to discuss criminal exposure. The gavel didn't slam, it tapped,
Soft. Final. Like the lid on a jar that just sealed. The room exhaled. Derek stood too quickly, then stopped as if the floor had changed shape. Mike stared down at his hands like they had betrayed him. Sarah remained seated. She was crying, yes, but quietly, as if a thing had finally stopped fighting inside her. Robert squeezed my shoulder, the gentlest version of a gesture that had failed so spectacularly in another hand. "It's done," he said. Outside, the corridor smelled like floor wax again, but now it carried a trace of fresh air. De Leon found us near the door. "The DA will pursue the financial piece," she said. "Elder abuse cases are slow until suddenly they're not." Her gaze softened almost imperceptibly. "You did good, Margaret." "We did. All of us." Sarah approached like a person entering a sanctuary she's not sure will welcome her. She stopped at a respectful distance. "Mom?"
I waited. "I can't ask you for forgiveness," she said. "I haven't earned it, but I will ask for work. For chores, I guess." Her laugh was small and honest. "Therapy, classes on elder law, a job notice at the school I quit because I thought I needed to be available for your care. I will ask to rebuild." My mouth wanted to say something kind. My bones wanted to say something wise. I chose the thing I promised the judge. Plain. Boundaries. My terms. In writing.